The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar, Practical Tips Working Effectively with Culturally Diverse Families, Children and Youth with Behavioral Health Needs. I'm Jamie Smith. I'm just going to offer a couple housekeeping or technical tips here. Today's webinar is scheduled from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. There are a couple of handouts that are available to you. It is in the look for the handouts section. There's two handouts available in that. You can download them from that handout screen. We are monitoring this at Pacer and for audio issues, but it's tough to troubleshoot in the midst of it. A couple tips is try earbuds if you can't hear well through the speakers. Survey and certificate. At the close of the webinar, there will be a certificate of attendance available to you. However, it will be sent in a follow-up email that you should receive on Friday. Look for that email from webinars@pacer.org. It will have a link to a survey on SurveyMonkey, and then upon completion of that survey, you will receive your certificate of attendance. It will be available for download. Let's see. If you're participating as a group, each person must complete a survey in order to receive a certificate of attendance. So just send the email addresses of your group to webinars@pacer.org. Okay, just getting to. Finally, there is we will entertain questions during and if we have time, and you can look and enter those questions in the question and answer section. Again, it's on the control panel on the left side of or on the right side of your screen. I believe that's all the information we need to do, and so I'm going to hand it over to Renelle.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Renelle Nelson. I'm a parent advocate and coordinator of the Mental Health and Emotional or Behavioral Disorders Project here at Pacer Center. We are a statewide nonprofit parent-directed organization in Minnesota with a mission to expand opportunities and enhance the lives of children with all disabilities and their families. I've worked at Pacer Center as a parent advocate and trainer for 20 years. Coming to that position after teaching, working as a school-based mental health professional and parenting 4 children, including a son with developmental and mental health needs. I've also served on the Minnesota school-wide Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Leadership Team and the Emotional or Behavioral Disorders Leadership Team as well. And currently am a member of the State Subcommittee on Children's Mental Health, which is part of the Mental Health Advisory Council. I will be one of your presenters today. I would now like to introduce our 4 multicultural presenters. Hasan A Samant is a parent advocate and trainer for Pacer Center. He is originally from Somalia and has worked at Pacer as a community outreach specialist and advisor to Somali parents. Hasan translates materials into Somali, provides workshops for parents and professionals, and works individually with Somali parents to help them understand the resources and support available for children and youth with disabilities. He has served on several district interagency early intervention outreach committees and collaborates with state and federal agencies on mental health and autism spectrum disorder projects. He's also the parent of a child with a health impairment and has been on Pacer staff for 10 years. Bonnie Jean Smith is another multicultural specialist, parent advocate, and trainer at Pacer Center. She's a member of the Minnesota Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities, an evaluator for the Minnesota Council for Quality, and a member of the Monitoring and TA Review System team for the Federal Administration on Developmental Disabilities. Bonnie Jean has also worked with high school students as a behavior specialist and as an educator and director at an early learning center. As the parent of 2 children with developmental disabilities, Bonnie Jean has used her parenting experiences to help other parents by writing a book, How Big is the Fly? Asking the Right Question. Jesus has been a multicultural specialist, parent advocate, and trainer at Pacer Center for 21 years. He works to support Latino families through direct advocacy support and translation of materials. Jesus is a member of the Diversity Advisory Committee at MDE and is chairman of the Latino Affairs Council. Previously, he served on the Minnesota Special Education Advisory Panel and was a national field reviewer for Cultural and Linguistic Appropriate Services Institute. Jesus is from Mexico and has an adult child with a learning disability. And then Dao Zhang is a parent advocate, trainer, and Southeast Asian multicultural advocate. He has been at Pacer Center for 26 years. Dao came to the United States over 30 years ago as a refugee and has an adult daughter and an adult son with mental health needs. Dao provides information and resources to Southeast Asian American families through individual support, translated materials, and workshops. We're excited to be able to provide this workshop or webinar through webinar to you today. For those of you who are in Minnesota, we hope you're warm and safe. Those of you who are not in Minnesota know that we're undergoing what's being called a polar vortex, so it's pretty crazy. We were at 27 below this morning, but we all showed up because we really feel very, very strongly about this topic. How do you work with culturally diverse families of children and youth with behavioral health needs? Why do we need to pay attention to this? And why do we need to pay attention to cultural diversity when we're working with these families? While white Americans continue to be the racial majority, with a 72% share of the U.S. population per the last U.S. Census in 2010, Black, Latino, and Asian Americans are expected to grow at nearly twice the rate of white Americans in the next 3 decades. Recently, the American Community Survey, which produces yearly population and demographic estimates between the 10-year census data collection, estimated that as of 2018, white Americans now make up 62% of our total population. The Pew Research Center estimates that by 2055, the breakdown is estimated to be 48% white, 24% Latino, 24% Asian, and 13% Black. The UN estimated in 2015 that around 150,000 Somalis, both refugees and non-refugees, live in the U.S. More Somalis live in Minnesota than any other state. As of 2004, an estimated 25,000 Somalis lived in Minnesota, with Minneapolis having one of the largest Somali populations. That population has grown exponentially since that time. The cultural diversity of the U.S. is no more evident than in the wide range of religious belief practices across the country as well. White Protestant Christian tradition is the clear majority at almost 49%, yet there are many varieties of Christianity, from liberal to conservative. 23% identified as Catholic. Judaism, at only 2.1%, is one of our most highly visible, with Jewish holidays being widely celebrated. And only 1% of the population is Islam. Interestingly, almost 23% identified as having no religion. Despite the fact that the United States is a diverse country, current research has also indicated that there is no significant difference in parents' interest in their child's success based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, or cultural background. Thus, any fundamental differences in how parents from diverse cultures relate to providers have their origin in ethnic and cultural differences, including psychosocial factors such as family structure and value systems, interactional patterns, or coping strategies. In turn, these factors are affected by a family's level of acculturation. We also know from research that individuals from minority populations are likely to experience more barriers to behavioral health. People in these populations are less likely to have access to available care, receive necessary mental health care, and frequently receive a poorer quality of treatment. They are also significantly underrepresented in the mental health research. Another significant factor that could impact the quality of care providers offer is the diversity that exists within groups. For example, Asian Americans include people from a variety of nations, such as China, India, Syria, Japan, and even Afghanistan. Some of them may be recent immigrants, while others may have lived in the United States for generations. The term African American includes people who have ties to Africa, where 54 different countries and over 2,000 languages are spoken. Native American includes people who may have only a fraction of their lineage be Native American, and may or may not identify with the culture of a certain tribe. Latino includes a group of people who may be from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Salvador, Domingo. Some are Central American, some are South American, and others may have other Hispanic or Latino origin. Finally, we must remember that mental health is also determined by a range of socioeconomic, biological, and environmental factors. The World Health Organization states health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Today's webinar will be an attempt to address the importance of perception, discuss the impact of culture, and consider the challenges related to communication while taking all of these things into consideration. PACER's multicultural advocates will also offer strategies and tips on how to work with culturally diverse families so that appropriate and adequate services can be identified and offered. Let's begin with the importance of perception. Because our world experiences are so different from one another, it's important to consider how our perceptions impact, or the meaning we place on what we see or do, affect relationships. Our interpretation of behavior is filtered through our own unique cultural experiences, expectations, and practices, as well as through our education. Different cultures also filter impressions through their specific cultural beliefs, practices, and education. We need to be careful if we think that our interpretation is accurate or the right way to consider behaviors, for example, because then we are concluding that other interpretations are lacking in accuracy. The truth is that what we see is defined not by what we are looking at, but how we perceive what we are looking at. This is such an inescapable product of our cultural training and life experience, and is such an ingrained set of beliefs that we must check as often as possible with others who may not share these beliefs in order to truly understand. Often, when we think about culture, it is what we are exposed to through our senses. We try new foods, appreciate new music, or admire traditional dress. This surface level of culture is what we experience during celebrations at communities, at schools, or maybe through the arts. It is what we can think of as visible culture. But visible culture represents a mere fraction of one's cultural experience. Most culture is completely submerged. It can only be learned about through long-term exposure or direct observation over time. When we breach an understood cultural rule, for example, have a different concept of time, or fail to appropriately greet a guest in a way that meets their cultural expectations, we run the risk of offending. Handshake's a classic example. Some people prefer a firm handshake and may believe that people who do not share that preference are weak or untrustworthy. Those who prefer a gentle hand touch may see those with a firmer grip as aggressive or controlling. These daily transactions result in mistaken assumptions about intent and can cause hurt feelings. When the occurrences relate to how a family raises a child, hurt feelings can quickly become an offense that is difficult to overcome. The deeper one goes into culture, the greater the risk of offending if rules are breached. Rules governing how people relate to one another, those kind of unseen rules, are the things that we learn early in life. Cultural meaning varies from culture to culture because different groups of people have determined different ways to solve common life problems, such as how to make a living, keep order, or keep themselves safe. Take a minute to think about your concept of, say, justice, or your definition of mental health, or what you think when pauses in conversation happen, or how you react to touch or eye contact, or how you determine your comfort zone for physical proximity. It is at this level of unconscious or unseen rules that strong negative responses, even hostility, can arise, and this is when people can feel disrespected. Communication is also very important, especially cross-cultural communication. Chances are that you hold at least some beliefs and practices that will be different from those of the families you serve. The key question is how the preferences you hold will affect your relationship with your families. For some individuals, polite conversation is characterized by a soft voice. Being polite and not disagreeing may also be an important cultural value. It may be even inappropriate in some cultures for a person to mention if they've been offended. For others, polite conversation includes being able to speak out honestly, even if it means interrupting or speaking loudly. In general, Americans tend to be direct, even confrontational at times when having an animated conversation. This can be quite intimidating or even feel threatening for those unfamiliar with this communication style. Some prefer a long pause between speakers. Others may interrupt a conversation, and both may consider their communication style to be the correct one. If you can be flexible in your communication style and pay attention to how your family is communicating with you and with each other, your communication style can adjust to help them feel more comfortable and competent and respected. Let me give you an example. Direct inquiry, for example, asking a specific question like, "What do you do for a living?" may be particularly problematic for individuals who are traditional within specific cultures, such as Native American, Latino, or Asian. For these parents, asking direct questions can feel confrontational or accusatory, even when that's not the intent. A more indirect conversational style like, "You take care of your family, you must have a good job. Can you tell me about it?" is often more successful, especially if you have told the family something about yourself first. It then becomes more of a friendly conversation about occupations rather than an interview. Some Russian immigrants tend to be less direct, for example. Family members may rely on indirect statements or hints when communicating about sensitive topics. You will want to pay attention and listen for these hints and explore them in a sensitive way. Think about it this way. If your close friend got a haircut she loved but you didn't think was flattering, what methods might you use to express your personal opinion without damaging your relationship? Would you point out that the haircut made your friend look older, or that it did not accentuate her best features? How you choose to say what you say often determines whether it will be heard, or whether the listener feels attacked or becomes defensive. Truth-telling, even in the most trusted relationships, can cause ill feelings. Decision-making is another area that needs consideration. Some families refer right away to professional expertise, while others want to be in charge of all decisions. Some will want to think about a conversation for a day or two, or even longer, before making any decisions. Some cannot make decisions in a meeting, but must take information back to others who will help with that process. Be conscientious about honoring how decisions are made within the families you're supporting. Some families get lost in rapid-paced conversation, while others prefer the kind of give and take. When families work with others who tend to be in control of the conversation, many will simply do as the provider suggests. Others may simply not follow through with the services that they even agreed on. Still, others may just simply drop out. Pay attention to how your families communicate to each other. Think about that direct versus indirect communication, formal versus informal, and then keep aware of your own mannerisms, your body language, your eye contact, your physical approach. Never ever assume that what you are comfortable doing to connect with someone from another culture is automatically understood. Being aware of communication as a continuum of preferences based in culture and learning from what you are observing is always going to be a more respectful way to initiate open conversation when working with culturally diverse families. Now I'm going to have our multicultural advocates highlight specific communication strategies and tips that you might want to consider when meeting and working with culturally diverse families. Let's start with Jesus.
Hi, I want to start with a question if you are in Minnesota. Is it cold enough for you? This is Jesus. Let's think about the impact of diversity. What would it be like if you had to stay overnight in a stranger's home? Someone that you had never met before. Would they know that you are a vegetarian? Or the kinds of foods that you prefer? Would you know whether they like wine with dinner? Or whether they dress formally or informally? Would you know their religious preferences that might be important to know during your visit? If these things were known, you would be less likely to risk offending the person you are visiting. You would know how to dress and whether a gift of wine would be appropriate. They would know what you like to eat. Of course, you could simply show up not knowing anything, but then you would then risk not doing or saying something that might unintentionally make them uncomfortable. Culture is like that too. The more we know about a family, their likes and dislikes, child rearing practices, preferences, educational level, the more likely that we will be able to avoid breaching important cultural boundaries and help the family to understand that we care about their child. Because a mental health provider may be in the life of a family for a few years, it helps to make a good impression from the start and to know how to meet the family without walking into invisible but real boundaries. The next section of today's webinar deals with the strategies for meeting with families. No matter what the family's racial or cultural background is, honoring certain rules that show respect are especially important in your first contact. Here are some tips for first contact with culturally diverse families. If you are doing a home visit, call them before the visit to prepare them for the meeting and answer any questions they may have about their services for their child. Showing up without notice is intimidating and may signal an unsafe situation to a family new in the United States or for any undocumented family. Be sure to explain confidentiality in a way that makes sense to the parents and think about the strategies that you may use to be sure that parents understand what is being discussed for their child. Now,
Thank you, Jesus. This is Tao. Another important thing to remember is not to assume all family have a way to keep in touch or a way to get information easily. If the family does not have a telephone or may have changed the telephone number, mail any relevant information and include your phone number so that they can call you if they have questions. Be sure to include a sentence or two on confidentiality. Clearly explain the purpose of the meeting and what the anticipated outcome will be. Explain who will participate and what they will specifically be doing during the meeting. Be sure to discuss the family's role and how they will be asked to participate during the meeting. Many Southeast Asian families respect school staff expertise, especially when the principal is attending. Explain her role or his role in the meeting and ask the family to bring their concern, if any. Even after the first meeting, it may be good to remind parents that they may ask anyone they know and trust to be at the meeting. A Hmong family, for example, may want to invite extended family members or their shaman to the meeting. Or if family mention any of the community healing practice, it is important to recognize what family do that matter to them. Hasan?
Thank you, Dal. This is Hasan. For Somali families are used to extended and a tribal culture that trusts and relies on each other. Trusting outsiders, even highly qualified professionals, may not be as easy transition to make for the families. There are some basic conceptions that you could use to help make this first interaction a positive one. Have a plan to greet the family in a way that is direct and respectful. At the first meeting, begin by sharing a little personal background information about yourself, including why you went into this profession and what you especially enjoy about it. Explain your professional role, why you are there, and what part will you play on the team in the future. If a new provider gets involved during the treatment process, make certain they do the same. Do you need to greet and address a particular gender in the family? If you do not know, direct your comments and responses to both the mother and the father of the child when both of them are present. Let the family inform you if there is a preference in who makes the decision for the family. Respect the family structure, even when it's not your own experience and value system. It will not be unusual for extended family members to be present when you arrive at home. These may or may not be blood-related relatives, but are still included as a family. The parents should determine who to include in the process. No matter how you personally feel about any cultural practice that is different from your own, you must be willing to be open and receptive to the differences. This does not mean that you must agree, just that you are willing to enter into a new cultural exchange in order to serve a child and a family effectively. Keep in mind that there will likely be a need for you to provide an explanation for the process and the systems involved. You cannot assume new immigrants will understand the structure of the county mental health system or the public education system and associated terminologies. Families have a unique needs and may need help in understanding how the services you can offer match to those individualized needs. Even if the process was explained in a pre-meeting contact, describe each part of the process as you go along, and invite the parents to ask questions at any time of the meeting. Be sure to check for understanding and offer examples of how these services may help. Know that even when you explain well, it may take some time families to really understand our system of care, and encourage them to contact you with any questions or concerns. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie.
African American or Black American families have long relied on their own ability to survive. It is not an easy switch to trusting someone else to care for your child. Helping African American families means helping them understand their participatory role and how important it is. Because families are so influenced by their own culture, they might struggle to know what their role should be. Some may find the concept of equal partner foreign because the authority decisions remain with the professionals in their lives. To ensure parents understand rights, it's important to know how they view the idea of rights in many cultures. Group interests are paramount to individual interests. Rights that focus on the individual may not be as important to some families as rights that protect the interdependence of the group. Many times, I know you've had stories of a child in a classroom with a disability that couldn't read, being told they had to read, but it was stood up by other students that knew that child couldn't read. And so hence the whole group got in trouble to protect that one. Building rapport and finding ways to agree may be more important to some parents than their individual goals for the child. This can be a major factor in parents not exercising or valuing their rights. Particularly, those rights are focused on an individual child and not the entire family. So be sensitive and alert to clues to the family's emotional state as you determine what issues to address and how to address them. It will not be unusual for the parent to initially say, "There's nothing wrong with my child." Acknowledge their viewpoint and recognize it may take time to develop enough trust in the relationship for the parent to realize and really hear and consider your input. Feel free to give examples or elaborate for African American families. Dal?
Thank you, Bonnie. In our culture, or the Hmong culture itself, meeting families includes certain things. Many Hmong families show their hospitality and respect by offering refreshment to a guest. If you are not able to accept food or beverage when visiting home, share this information before the visit in a formal way, so the parents does not feel pressure to have something prepared or offend if you refuse what is offered. You may also wish to bring something like your own bottle of water with you so the family sees that you have what you need. Some family may offer you a gift after a first appointment or at the conclusion of services. Follow your professional judgment as well as your employer's policy. Whether or not you accept the gift, express appreciation. If you must decline, explain that as much as you would like to accept the gift, your employer does not allow you to do so. Jesus?
Thank you, Don. Be sure to ask if the family wants an interpreter. The first person who connects with the family should ask if they need or want an interpreter and translated materials. This information should become part of the family's file so that each time a meeting is scheduled, the interpreter will be contacted to attend. Written materials in the family's primary language keeps agreements clear and focused. According to a predetermined process, the information should be relayed to the appropriate person to make the necessary interpreter or translator arrangements, and to the professional who will be making the next contact with the family. Parents whose primary language is not English will need interpreters who are fluent in the language or terminology of mental health and who can explain why services are needed and how families can participate in a way that is informative and correct. It is best not to use a family member for translating. Family members tend to both understate and overstate information that is emotional. Sometimes the material may not be appropriate for the age of the person interpreting, and there may also be paraphrasing and softening difficult information that parents need to know. Plan ahead for an interpreter if it would benefit the family, or if they agree that one would be useful. If an interpreter is being used, depend on him or her to be the expert on the language and culture, even if you have some familiarity with the language. If no interpreter is available, despite your best efforts, build understanding in whatever ways you can, but keep the meeting to general information. An unresolved language barrier makes it impossible to accurately determine eligibility or services. The best strategy is to call the meeting off and reschedule. Even when the family speaks English, do not assume that they can read at the reading level of many documents. Check frequently for understanding. Offer to explain unfamiliar words or acronyms. If you are taking notes, read what you have written to the parent before giving them the document. If you discover that the parent cannot read materials, offer to provide the information in a different format, for example, a tape-recorded version. Finally, at the conclusion of the meeting, explain what will happen next in the process and provide an anticipated timeline for future activities. Encourage the parents to call if questions or concerns arise between meetings. End the visit on a positive note by praising a child or family's strength and thanking the parents for their valuable time, input, and participation. Renette?
I just want to mention, thank you, Jesus, that we are getting some questions, which we really appreciate, and we will try to respond to them in a timely fashion because we want to try to keep this to an hour. I believe we can keep your questions in our
Queue.
Thank you, Jamie. And then, so if we don't get to them during this particular presentation, we'll for sure get back to you with the question and the answers that we can provide. Let's talk next about strategies for working with families. Cultural differences are really important to consider when especially introducing the concept of rights. But depending on whether the parent has been or the family has been in the United States a long time or is a recent arrival, that may really influence how you explain what their rights are. The parents' belief system also regarding their role in keeping their child well, being involved in education, and using other systems of care are huge predictors of their understanding of what their rights are and what services and supports you are offering that could potentially be helpful to them. Rather than using the word rights at the onset of a meeting, it's often more effective to help parents understand how highly their role is valued in planning and reinforce their expertise in understanding and expressing the needs of their child. I know we frequently tell parents, you're the expert in your child. You know your child better than anyone. And so one of our roles as advocates is to help our parents be able to feel comfortable in expressing what they really believe their child needs, what their family needs to be able to support their child. Also, finding out what interventions have been used with their child, maybe traditional ones, ones maybe related to the use of outside or other kinds of professionals or community members within their cultural community. Learn as much as you can about your individual family. Be sure that the services and supports that you discuss fit into their comfort zone. The concept again of rights can be even explained as a structure for building agreement, and at the same time honor the knowledge and culture of that family. So be sure you understand and reinforce the value of parent participation within that rights language. There are a lot of different strategies for working with families, and I'm sure you all have many different wonderful ideas on how to best connect with the families you work with and how to share their hopes and dreams for their child while you're offering the kinds of things that you know maybe have worked in the past that are research-based or evidence-based practices. But some parents may be reluctant to have their child in services and may be fearful of what will happen to their child. Especially when we have a stigma related to mental illness and the cultural implications that mental health needs may have. Parents may be reluctant to have their child identified as needing services. Just make sure that you allow enough time in the process for getting to know your families so that they can make decisions in a way that makes sense to them. Jesus?
Families often feel that they will be judged on how they parent their child. The extra demands of having a child with mental health needs, as well as the size of the family, may make it especially challenging. Families may be reluctant to invite company into a situation that they feel may reflect badly on their family or on their parenting skills. If the family is hesitant to meet or have services in their home, you may want to offer the option of finding another location in the community. Realistically, sometimes we do judge families, and it may show up in reports, how they are written or what they say. Because even confidential records can be subpoenaed, it's very important to be unbiased and accurate. Families are often wary of strangers in their home, especially those from outside their own culture. Even when you are pressed for time, it is essential to devote time to conversation and activities that will help to build the trust in the relationship. Hasan?
When it comes to physical contact, in many Somali homes, it's better not to initiate a handshake unless the individual extends their hand to you first. Depending on the individual's religious belief, physical contact may be inappropriate at certain times. It's not just the Somali or Muslim families that express the preference against the physical touch. Some Eastern European cultures may prefer to avoid cross-gender physical contact as well. When you arrive, state the purpose of the meeting and the length of the appointment up front. Do your best to end on time. Even when families have other activities on their own schedule, they may be reluctant to interrupt you or inform you the need to end the visit. Dao?
Thank you, Hasan. Some beginning open-end question will encourage parents to communicate rather than to simply answer questions. You might want to say something like, I'm going to be working with you to offer some ways help your child. What would you like to tell me about your child that could possibly help me? What do you expect from me? What are your hopes and dreams for your child? What do you know about your child's condition? Understand the family culture and learning about the emotional impact of a child's behavior or mental health needs in the family will help you to better understand a family's choice. In some Asian homes, family may use a combination of Western and Eastern medicine, philosophies, and approach. This may include the use of massage, herbal remedy, acupuncture, and other healing practice. For a Hmong family, for example, they may call a shaman to go to and train to see if the child's spirit is impaired or is lost. Includes these interventions as a strength of the family in finding ways to work with the child. For example, if the child will benefit from play therapy, find out first what the family may already be doing in the area of developing social behaviors. Is the child already involved in the community activity where an in-home family therapist could participate and incorporate their work in that natural setting? Bonnie?
Understand that in the African American / Black community, the elders are always contacted for help, whether it's from burning sage or if it's using mustard packs, because doctors were not always readily available and the trust of the medical system was not always there. So they would go to the elders, and then when all else fails, then they would come in to the medical piece. Make sure that when you're working with the family, you give them times where you can be reached. And what is the turnaround time for you to contact them? If you leave me a message, I'll get back to you in 24/48 hours. Okay? Take care not to assume that parents have the same image of children as professionals might. Parents may differ in their assumptions about who their children should become and what services may be most useful. Attitudes towards children's care and development are influenced by the factors such as socioeconomic background, age, and cultural beliefs. How parents socialize their children and meet their needs are embedded in culture. For example, all African Americans parents teach their children to respect elders. But if trouble starts, some are taught to react using the Old Testament adage, an eye for an eye concept, while others are taught for fear of the zero tolerance policies to bring their problems home to trusted elders. Mental health and treatment reflects a Western perspective. The differences between providers and the family in meeting the needs of children with behavioral or mental health struggles for cultural diverse families can be exasperating. It can also be surprising, however, for having knowledge about how the family believes will also lead to a better understanding of the family's focus, what they see as important areas of learning and growth for their child. Not understanding these basic differences can create a wedge between parents and providers. Speaking English. During a meeting, a parent may appear to understand what's being said, even if he or she does not understand at all. And just because a person speaks English does not mean they understand what you're talking about. And that happens over and over in the African American community. If you ask directly, do you understand? Parents may answer yes, even if they do not. You will need to check for understanding in informal ways as you go along. For instance, would you like a list of possible next steps? Okay? And then what makes sense to you? And what questions does this raise for you? Would you like to look at them and contact me later with questions that might rise from this list? And then that goes back into your 24, 48 hours if they have questions. But what you're doing is you're building a relationship with them so they're in charge and they're making a choice instead of you being the professional making all the choices. The next slides will contain information from each of PACER's multicultural advocates about their specific culture, address some of the challenges you might face as a provider, and offer some suggestions on how to respectfully communicate and work with them. Hasan?
Thank you, Bonnie. As an advocate for the Somali families, I see some challenge on how to provide culturally respectful services. But developing relationships with the Somali families is not unlike developing relationships with other families who are challenged through their cultural differences. In particularly working with the Somali families, having a relationship and a good cordial relationship with the professionals, it's a fundamental part of our culture. Taking the time to get to know the family through informal conversation, it's a very helpful way. This helps to establish a sincere and respectful climate that can set the stage for a good communication during more difficult times. Be prepared to address language challenges with the interpreter and the family. Know that some Western concepts are not translatable and have to be explained through examples. Recognize the differences in expectations for development and age-appropriate skills. For example, many Somali children have not been exposed to structure before coming to this country. Things like sitting in a classroom, standing in a line, or waiting for your turn is a foreign concept to us. Because of this, some children may look disruptive, inattentive, or sometimes even aggressive. Also, many Somali families struggle with the concept of a mental illness. Youth as immigrants feel an intense pressure to succeed, if not to excel, in part to justify their parents' sacrifices. A lot of Somali parents who work hard and long hours frequently remind their children that they left their home country to provide better opportunities for them. As a result, the pressure to succeed and the expectations to excel is very intense. These expectations often prevent early intervention. Immigrant families are also unfamiliar with the social system of care. They are fearful of giving out too much information because they do not understand the idea of a confidentiality. Seeking help from the mosque is a common practice in the Somali community because mosques play a singular important role that is the place they turn to for safety and to heal what they believe is a spiritual sickness rather than a psychiatrist crisis. And although doctors and lawyers are very respected, religious persons have unrivaled standings, even among those who are not religious. Somali language is not compatible with the words used to describe mental health or mental illness. For instance, there's no word for depression in the Somali language. There are a lot of immigrants who have been worked up to the headaches by a neurologist when they were just simply really suffering from a depression. In many cases, parents actually encourage marriage almost as a cure for mental health or mental illness. Somalis don't view mental illness as a sickness or even as an illness, but as a family curse, and they try to take care of it by themselves. Bonnie?
My name is Bonnie Jean Smith, and I'm an African American, Black American advocate. To look at me, you would not know that my father was a Navy Sealie attached to the Air Force, and I grew up in Europe and the United States. I always mention this fact about myself to remind us not to make assumptions based on appearances. I have 4 children, 3 have Asperger's, which means they learn on the autism spectrum. Remember, every family has a different culture, even if they have the same ethnicity. Some families are loud, some are not. When visiting a family in my community, it's very important to share history about yourself and why you chose to work with children who may need mental health support. It is also very important, if you do not understand something you have seen or heard, to not make assumptions. Simply ask for clarification. This will show the parents that you are open and willing to learn about their child and their family. Affirm what the parents have been doing with their child and put it into the context of what services you will be providing. When building relationships, stay transparent and always check for understanding. Don't just ask, do you understand? It is important to repeat initial contact information and state over and over during your intake, this is your contact person if you have any questions, concerns, or if you need to reschedule for any reason. It is respectful to address an adult using the terms Mr., Mrs., Miss, or Ms. Children are taught from a very early age that this is a sign of respect in my community. When assisting a family with identified needs, refer them only to available resources that you know are there to provide what you're sending them there for. Be certain they are appropriate for that family and will honor their culture and ethnicity. Jesus?
I don't expect to speak for all the Latino community and families because there's a great diversity within our ethnicity, our culture. And so therefore there are many different levels of acculturation. Some families are very familiar with the systems of care and have figured out how to fit their family beliefs and child's needs into that system. Others are new to the system and have a great deal of fear and concern about using a system that they don't understand or one that could possibly jeopardize their ability to stay in the United States. Establishing trust through good communication is the best approach. Being prepared to address confidentiality and working with the interpreter ahead of time are two excellent ways to start building that trusting relationship. Latino families experience a great sense of loss when they come to the United States. The closely knit family unit that is characteristic of Latino families has been disrupted, and close relatives, extended families, and friends have been left behind. Latinos find themselves alone in a country in a survival mode and with no sense of security. Many times, Latinos have confused depression and mood disorders with nostalgia. Because they were isolated and in crisis, they failed to recognize the need to reach out for support. It also did not help that their systems looked like they were being crazy. Not long ago, we were dealing with issues of identity in children growing in American culture with parents trying to raise them in the traditional Latino culture. I got a call from a mom 2 weeks ago complaining that her son with ADHD had been suspended for 5 days because he went to school and the usual person that does bully on him, he pushed back and the principal intervened trying to hold her child, and the child, while shaking and to get away, hit the principal with the head. And he was suspended for 5 days. And what the mom was really concerned is because the child was so emotional is because 2 days before his father had been deported, and their life was turned upside down. If the mother would have shared that information maybe to the school, if the principal, instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, would have not confronted the child, I think the child would have not been suspended. Over the last 2 years, the racist and xenophobic attacks on the Latino community, and specifically the Mexican community, has been brutal. Families are living under the fear that this administration has been imposing on them like never before. I myself have been called a rapist and a murderer, a drug dealer and a bad hombre, just for being Mexican. What? What the heck? The effort to dehumanize a whole community is relentless and it is wrong. How did this happen? When referring human beings as illegals, even in the media, by asserting that Latinos don't want to speak English. Do you know how hard it is to speak another language? And by the way, most Latino children are learning and speaking English, which is great, but it can also create a big communication gap between children and their parents. By claiming that Mexicans don't want to wait their turn at the end of the line to come to the United States, well, there's no such line unless a Latino marries an American citizen or have children that are American citizens over 21 years of age that will sponsor them, they cannot come legally. That's why we need comprehensive immigration reform. These are simple facts that many people are not aware of or gladly ignore, choosing to believe the misinformation that is fed to them. You must say to those that those are just words, but words matter, words hurt, and children are listening. Down.
Thank you, Jesus. So the Asian family will seek help and resource in different ways. Be open to their needs and validate their attempts. Be sure to consider how they view the child's mental health needs and understand it. You should not attempt to westernize their view of mental health. That will cause them to lose trust and confidence in you. Focus on their strengths and incorporate traditional practice into your approach. This will show respect and honor. Consider difference in view of disability, particularly behavior. Oftentimes, Hmong families feel that the child's lost the spirit rather than something happened in the brain. And also, the family of emotion and community style also a difference. That they rather express direct what they want to say to you, rather than wait for you to pay attention to what they say. When you visit a Hmong family, for example, be aware that they may not have a room to meet rather than the family living room while the children are around or many of their relatives are around. Many Southeast Asian families do not understand the Western concept of mental health. They believe the cause of the problem is either from an evil spirit or even a curse. Many don't think a mental health condition like post-traumatic stress disorder is due to their past trauma, but it is from the challenge of meeting their daily responsibility to their family and making new life in the strange and family country. Others think of it as a medical condition with real physical symptoms, such as panic disorder. My son always thinks his depression is a way to become a Buddhist or a shaman. He dreams of being with these spirits and believes that he will heal if he becomes a monk or a shaman himself. Some Southeast families will first consult with the shaman, elders, and or church leaders. They might do massage and then their family physician if they are not getting any relief. Even for severe mental health problems, they will first resort to traditional healing practice before seeking mental health services. Trusting medication and therapy to have a mental health condition is difficult for Salesian families, and unless they know someone who has used medication and therapy successfully, they won't do it. Whatever their tradition or belief is, understanding their perception is significant. Believe it or not, people will comfortable with what they experience. They will seek outside help when what they have used is not working. It is good for them to know that there are mental health service as an option. Be clear about a proposed treatment plan is important. Surprises are not good. Many years ago, when my daughter had an episode of depression and stayed away for 2 nights, I did not know what to do. I consulted with my parents and my cousin, who were shamans. My wife gave her sleeping pills, which did not help. We took her for a long drive to St. Cloud, and that did not help either. Finally, we called our county crisis hotline and were told to bring her to the hospital. She was treated there for a week. We learned firsthand about how to assess mental health service from that experience, but wish that we had that information earlier so that we could have been more comfortable and confident in what we were doing. Now,
Remember that what you and the family have in common is the well-being and support of that child or that youth. As the professional, you have the responsibility of initiating a respectful relationship with the family. However, the responsibility for sustaining the relationship is shared by you and the family of the child. Working effectively with families from diverse cultures does not require you to become a cross-cultural expert. However, it does require you to be more intentional and thoughtful in your communication with parents and families who come from a different culture or tradition than your own. Our hope is that you will find opportunities to use the information and strategies from this training and shared by our multicultural advocates in ways that work for you and lead to better outcomes for the families and children to whom you're providing services and supports. Because in the very end, every family truly has their own culture. We took up the entire time. We appreciate you staying on with us. We want to thank you for attending. We do have some questions that came in, and we will be sure to get a hold of you via email and respond to those questions. We want to thank you again for attending, and here's just a page to remind you about our online evaluation survey and when we need to receive it, and that if you are participating as a group, each person must complete a survey in order to receive a certificate of attendance. So if you are the organizer, please forward the survey link to each participant. If you are viewing this as an archived webinar, we are not able to provide any certificates of attendance. If you have any questions, feel free to call me or any of the multicultural advocates. We appreciate your time and the efforts that you're taking to make sure that the services and supports you give are appropriate to the populations that you work with. Take care and stay warm.